I hope you're doing great. I'm loving my life. Who could complain on a day like today? None of us. B for victory saying Bomatan. Good morning, Bitcoiners. CB. Good morning, good sir. Good morning, good sir. Double B. It's a wonderful day to be us. We're all going to make it. Good morning. I think so too. Every day walking with Christ. Good morning, non-bug eating maxis, and God bless you all. Lots of folks denying the bugs today. Live long and prosper with B, says Defina. Good morning, Quentin. Bitcoin graffiti, eat the bugs. The bugs. Eat the bugs. Coffin and bug eating. Assalamu alaikum. Losing the InfoWars will only result in the future Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia run by the ministries of truth, love, and peace and plenty, and a bunch of us Bitcoiners underground. Yeah, could be. Yeah, could be. It could be. Bitcoin graffiti, you did not miss a board. I've been having a tough time getting it out. These things don't move, so I've got to figure out a little logistics here. We still have a few days, though. We're going to get that board up. And don't worry, because when we get back to Barbados, we have a board there, so we're going to be fine. Ben, good day, team. Greg, Jones' interview with Tucker, pretty incredible. Spoke of the pre-suasion hypnosis techniques enabling him to make sound predictions. I saw that, Greg. We're going to be talking all about it. Christine, good morning. Good morning, fam. We will not eat the bugs. No one should eat the bugs. Don't do it. No boards so far. No, no boards. We're doing our best, guys. Bitcoin graffiti K. Z must eat the bugs. Elizabeth Warren, with her incessant lying, is a clear and present danger. Indeed, Thomas. We'll talk about her. Satoshi Nakamoto is better than Cubs. I know. I couldn't find Satoshi Nakamoto today every day. It is downstairs. And I got this. I'm not used to this house. I've had a lot of trouble with the floors. I'm used to like the one floor situation. And where this is like in the attic. So I got to take a ladder downstairs, which is fine. I'm not complaining about the ladder, but it's a whole thing. Yeah. So the bear cap. Yeah. Sorry, guys. I noticed that just before I got on, but I just got upstairs and I was like, no, I'm not doing it again. Not, I'll be 5 minutes late. So it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. I didn't notice what was going on. And this one just happened to be nearby, but that's okay. Right. So I didn't feel like going down and up, but the sun is up. Right, we got a sun up, right? Sunrise Tech working fine, and Bitcoin also working fine, despite no Satoshi Nakamoto hat. So all that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. And Bitcoin graffiti, I will let you know, it is not a bear cap, it is a cub cap, all right? As our friend Everyday Walking with Christ here has noticed, it is the Cubs hat, right? So it's a little bear, it's a baby bear, it's a baby bear. Good morning, Lightning Band. Hope everyone's doing great. All right, let's get some Moscow time. I got a good edition of Moscow time. This is an oldie but a goodie. All right, so this one came up. Wall Street Silver said, "Remember this?" And it's from 2022, so 2 years ago, right around now, December. All right, it's bearish. It is very bearish, indeed, indeed. And Chicagoland here will Chicagoland gets what's going on, right? This is a Chicago hat. So there you go, Jason. He knows all about it. Yeah. It is not bearish for the markets. It's just a cub hat. It's a baby bear, you know. All right, so this is an oldie but a goodie, and sometimes we like the classic Moscow time, right? And we had to go into a bit of the classics because, as you know, Washington Post did its one-day strike. Now, as everyone can imagine, I support a much more thorough and complete strike for Washington Post, despite what it will do for my Moscow Times sources. But I support an indefinite Washington Post strike with all interested parties who, and I will do the Washington Post again. That's my part to support your strike, right? They asked us not to read the paper yesterday. I'll do them better. I'll do them much better. So in our dearth of Moscow time, because the Washington Post is around, I got an oldie from Wall Street Silver. He's probably in the same boat as me. He's probably saying, "Damn, I had that appetite for fake news today and I couldn't find it," right? But here's what we know from the Daily Mail from 2 years ago. Broccoli and raspberries could give you COVID. Health experts warned after learning the virus can live on popular foods for as long as a week. But I guess they chose broccoli and raspberries here. So we got a good one here too. This is from Blue. This is not a classic, right? This is a real time. Real time. You know, the Cope people, the Cope headlines, right? All the people in Dubai doing COP 20 something, COP 24 or whatever it's called. Um, Bloomberg Green, of course, one of our great Moscow Times sources, not on strike, have this really great headline today. All right, so I'm going to share it with you. Here are 5 key climate terms to know for a modern discussion about the weather. You don't want to have those old-fashioned discussions about the weather. You want to have a modern one, all right? What goes into a modern discussion of the weather? Weather porn, obviously. Polar vortex. You can't talk modern weather unless you talk about the polar vortex. So remember, guys, don't have an old-fashioned conversation about the weather. It must be modern, okay? And you got to read Bloomberg to know how to have a modern conversation about the weather. This one's pretty good for all you exercisers out there, right? So here's what the New York Post is telling us today. Exercise may not be the key to living longer. It might even be aging you faster. All right, so don't exercise, guys. This one's great. This one's from the Wall Street Journal. The U.S. can afford a bigger military. We just can't build it. America's industrial base struggles to ramp up defense production while China's churns out even more weapons. That sounds great. There's still some fallout from Vivek Ramaswamy's debate performance from 2 days ago when he was just knocking everybody out. It kind of reminded me, when you see these, in wrestling, when a hero comes in overpowered in WWF, I still call it WWF, but other people call it WWE. When a wrestler comes in and they're overpowered and they just like punch everyone in the ring and knock them out, right? That was kind of like Vivek on the debate stage of the day. He was just like this overpowered wrestler, and it looked scripted. He was kicking their ass so bad. But not everyone was okay with that. CBS News writes here that Vivek's attacks in the fourth GOP debate were, of course, misogynistic. All right, it was woman-hating. CBS News political director Finny Go reports from the spin room on what the campaign said behind the scenes. The misogynistic guy, and there's a whole bunch of them, right? The New York Times had the following headline on Vivek. They say, defending Trump, Ramaswamy rattles off right-wing conspiracy theories. Vivek Ramaswamy called the January 6th attack an inside job, claimed that the 2020 election was stolen by big tech, and suggested that the Great Replacement theory was a Democrat policy. So they're not okay with all of these conspiracy theories. And they also, another one gave him the old tin hat treatment. So they put a tin hat on him. And this was the headline that we got from there. It was Vivek Ramaswamy pulls out his tinfoil hat in unhinged debate attention grab. And they say he went the full Alex Jones. So Vivek gets criticized for making predictions and for making calls that are Alex Jones-esque. Could it be could they be pumping his tires anymore, right? So speaking of Alex Jones, of course, Alex Jones was on Tucker Carlson last night. If you haven't seen it, it's excellent. It's pretty long. It's about an hour and a half. I watched it last night and it kept me up late. I don't usually stay up that late, but it was that entertaining that I was up to past 11 watching this interview because I was so entertained by it. And it actually starts with this whole idea of being a conspiracy theorist versus what Alex Jones has become, right? So Tucker sort of gives you that posture where who's like, if I would have been sitting down with you, Alex, like this before COVID, I would be like, well, he's a sincere, he's not crazy, he believes all this stuff, but he said, I wouldn't have thought you were even in the realm of reality. He goes, now after COVID, everything you say clicks. So it's a big deal. And what he did was he mentioned that Alex Jones was a prediction machine, which is why we do predictions here all the time, right? I've been saying why we need to do predictions, why predictions are so important. Predictions, what they end up doing for you is they allow you to judge your worldview at the time you made a prediction, right? So it's not so much predicting that's the useful activity. What predictions do is they are a snapshot of your worldview at the time you made the prediction. So if the thing comes true, generally it's because your system that you use to make that prediction, to generate that idea, was accurate enough that it would created this predictive model. That's partly what science is all about, right? Now, the prediction stuff is what you see in the computer models, and I understand predicting is not exactly science, right? But nevertheless, it's a test of your worldview at the time. And consciousness, in some ways, right? We've talked about this a lot with AI and things like that, just defining what consciousness is. Consciousness to me is that little gap in time between making a prediction, seeing the results of the real life activity, and whether or not your prediction was confirmed or denied, right? And in general, that's how the human mind works. If your prediction was right, you get a little bit of dopamine, right? You get a little hit of dopamine. If your prediction's wrong, you don't get the hit of dopamine, which makes you recalibrate and create a new prediction. And within this little gap of time, making a prediction, the time between the realization of that prediction or not, you can adjust, you can do all these things, but that's really the name of the game. That's why we make predictions here publicly, right? It's a way to test whether or not at the time we made the prediction, if our worldview was accurate, if we were taking in all the variables, if we were taking in all the sources, right? So that's exactly how Alex Jones started the interview, or sorry, Tucker Carlson started the interview with Alex Jones, talking about the amount of predictions he's gotten right. So, of course, he went with the famous July 2021, July 2001 prediction, which was that they were going to fly airplanes, jets into skyscrapers, probably the World Trade Center, and they would probably blame Osama bin Laden for it. Right now, um, Alex does say, "Look, I was running a bunch of scenarios that day, so it wasn't just that one. I was running a ton of scenarios. That one happened to be the one that happened within months." But they go through the other ones, right? So Alex Jones making his prediction last summer that by now we would be back into these COVID warnings, but it failed. And he would, uh, Tucker basically did a opening monologue all about his prediction, all about Alex Jones's predictions and his correct predictions, how predictive he really has been. So of course, the whole conversation turns to his worldview, exactly as we've been discussing here, right? The worldview that you have is really the methodology that you use to create these predictions. So Tucker was asking him straight up, like, how do you do these predictions? And he says, look, I just take them at their word. I just read this stuff and read that stuff. And I go and look at the notes from the Atlantic Council. I go and look at the notes from defense meetings. I go look at testimony of the WEF and all these people. It's not rocket science, he says. I just take people at their word, take the predictions and run with it, right? Um, so what was interesting anyway, I thought, was that the predictions that he made last night, so he made new predictions, they also happen to be the predictions we've been making here. So what predictions did Alex Jones make on the show last night? So he went through his track record of predictions for sure. But the other predictions that he made were that Trump was going to be assassinated. We've been talking about that for a while here, right? That it's probably the next thing to happen. So they had a long conversation about that. They also had a conversation about Joe Biden being assassinated. Now, what did I say this summer? If you remember, I said Joe's probably not going to make it till Christmas. Now, it looks like he might make it to Christmas. But what I was saying over the summer was that he was out, and the only one keeping him in place was himself, right? That he was there probably trying to keep his kid out of jail and himself out of jail, and but that the people around him had given up on him and were saying, no, 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 we're not going to go with this guy anymore. So I made a prediction, not that he would be blown away like John F. Kennedy, but it would be some sort of situation where he just didn't wake up, right? Whoops, gone, right? So I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's what Alex Jones said as well, right? So just to put some sticks in the ground here, we made some predictions over the summer that are identical to those that Alex Jones made. We're not unique in this way. I think a lot of people see the Donald Trump assassination piece. A lot of people see the Joe Biden one. Probably less see the Joe Biden one than the Donald Trump one, but that's out there, right? So the he also made he did make some really amazing revelations, right? So before we get back into our theme about the InfoWars, one of the ones that he made was hilarious. Just the image. Remember when we were talking about the Craig Wright of presidents, that being Joe Biden, and the sort of like punishment, you get what you ask for, right? We don't really know how degraded he is psychologically and cognitively, Biden. According to, but according to Alex Jones, he is absolutely hopped up on amphetamines and wanders around the house most days without any clue who he is, completely naked, beating the dog, and apparently that happened, and generally just being an old misanthropic dementia type person who's usually angry and scared because they don't know who they are. So what he says is he wanders around the entire 2.5 years, but it's getting worse, naked in the White House in the middle of the night, doesn't know who he is. So I don't know if it's true, but I believe it, right? Um, he goes further. So he does say that the deep state killing Trump is their only next move because it's failing. And then he adds they're going to kill Biden too. So those were the predictions we made. And then he makes the predictions, of course, about the CBDCs, the 15-minute cities, and eating the bugs, right? So we talk about eating the bugs and the 15-minute cities a lot, right? It's pretty obvious. We talks about the anti-human system. So that's how I'm able to make predictions because they've given us this roadmap. And so when the public wakes up, we push back on some of it, but he says they're like shark's teeth. They just keep coming back all the time, right? They talked about the promotion of ugliness within the regime, right? So Corinne Jean-Pierre, which is something that I've said for a long time. So I originally said that Trump in 2016, I predicted Trump was going to denigrate and destroy the press secretary job by putting someone way more boring than himself so that it would turn the whole exercise into a less serious, less whatever situation. In the end, he didn't really do that. He ended up hiring someone very competent, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and she did, I think, a good job. But I predicted he was going to destroy the institution because it was useless, and he was going to get rid of it. So it didn't work out that way. In the end, it was Biden who did it, and by putting this Karine Jean-Pierre after the other one. Remember what was the other one who's on MSNBC now, and she's just terrible, right? Both of them are just disgusting. And what they were saying was that it was one of these things, and they used this hilarious analogy that the point was to have ugliness in our midst in order to ruin and demotivate people. So one of the analogies they used to describe Karen Jean-Pierre was like having a nice ball in the White House, but then Brian Stelter shows up and shits in the middle of the ballroom. That's the way they describe it. Very visual, very difficult to deny. Jen Psaki, yeah, Psaki, yeah, yeah. So that's what they said. So now, he made these predictions about he made these predictions and about Trump and Biden. He also made a prediction, which I think is important for all of us to hear out loud, because I haven't seen it this far yet. I haven't taken the conclusions this far. So he's quite a bit ahead of me. Talking about the flight from the cities and something a lot of Bitcoiners have already done, right? And talking about how you should, if you're in a position to fight the regime with one hand, but you've got to have a backup plan, which is sort of a rural existence to get out of the cities and away from the zombies and the NPCs and the program mind controlled robots that'll go out and, like I say in my book, Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management, they'll kill you if they're hypnotized into doing so, right? So you got to protect yourself. What he says here is that they're going to be more or less starved in the cities, and that shortly they'll be instructed to come out to the countryside and stamp down rural Americans. So he's saying that's going to happen. He goes, the last group they don't control is rural people. They have to demolish the cultures and societies that were here before and bring in the next phase, a high-tech cashless society, robot drone controlled nightmare. So I mean, it sounds like it's in the realm of things we talk about in Bitcoin. It is the contrast of what we're offering, right? The world is, if you listen to the old Gnostic beliefs, right? Everything is a pendulum, everything is a spectrum, everything, instead of opposites, are just a continuation on a spectrum. And so when we think of Bitcoin, the opposite of Bitcoin is exactly what he's describing, right? The opposite of a Bitcoin world, of a Bitcoin standard universe, is a high-tech cashless robot drone controlled nightmare. So he got that. He nailed that one, right? And so he goes in from there about why social credit, and then the next major part of his prediction from here until the dawning of this high-tech cashless robot drone controlled nightmare is something he calls wealth destruction, right? So the destruction of American individual prosperity and wealth, as well as a race war. So he's putting those two things as the major catalyst to get us there, right? Now, 5 years ago, that would have sounded absolutely, totally insane. At this point, he's right on schedule, right? And how do we know? Well, Elizabeth Warren from yesterday and the day before is actually both of those stories at once, right? She's both at once. How is that? Well, so we saw what she did yesterday going on air saying on the Andrew Ross Sorkin all over the news these days, right? He was in the Elon Musk interview. I've met him many times and have been interviewed by him as well, but he had Elizabeth Warren on yesterday. And of course, they're talking about how Bitcoin is funding nuclear arms in North Korea, right? So a lot of people have known what a absolutely disgusting human being Elizabeth Warren is for a long time. Bruce Fenton mentions it here. He says, I've been a strong and vocal critic of Warren for years. Many in Bitcoin and Ethereum and related communities supported her, and I never could understand it. Now that it is completely clear what she stands for, hopefully those supporting her will self-reflect on why and how they got fooled. Kaneko with the great rights. Senator Elizabeth Warren says there's a new threat out there. It's crypto, and it's being used for terrorist financing, drug trafficking, and North Korea is using it to pay for about half of its nuclear weapons program. We can't allow that to continue. So she's sort of coming on the heels of what Jamie Dimon said. She got community noted as well, right? Obviously, because she doesn't know what's going on. Bitstein writes, her whole shtick was that she was a school marm that's going to protect you, the little guy from the big bad banks. Now she's gloating how all the big banks agree with her that we should crack down on the only little guy that could protect us and save your money. And then Walker America, if you guys know Walker America, who's great, right? Walker America comes out and says, so he he replied to her tweet and said, I don't usually agree with CEOs of multi-million-dollar banks, but when I do, it's to strip away the basic freedom to transact from American citizens. So everyone's been doing this meme of the Dos Equis beer guy, right? I don't normally drink beer, but when I do, it's the Dos Equis. So then Walker realizes this after he completely ratios her, right? So she's got 6 point something million followers. He's got 30,000. He observes this. When a pleb with under 30,000 followers ratios a sitting US senator with 6.9 million followers, it's a pretty good indication that the senator in question does not speak for the people and does not speak the truth. Bitcoin doesn't care, but Bitcoiners do. Now, in the same interview, right, in the same interview with, so this is the wealth destruction piece, right? Think about that for a second. This is the wealth destruction piece that Alex Jones is talking about. The controlled demolition that he was talking about. So think of this controlled demolition economics piece, and then add this race war to it. Because in the same conversation, Elizabeth Warren, who some people call Chief Spreading Bull, other people call her Pocahontas. Both of those names are silly, right? So Elizabeth Warren, of course, comes from academia, right? So in the same interview with Bitcoin, they ask her to weigh in on all this thing where the university presidents can't define if genocide is protected by freedom of speech or not, right? The ones who are all getting fired now. So if you didn't know that, we were talking about it was Liz McGill from UPenn, President Gay of Harvard and whatever, MIT. So these people were the ones who struggled to be able to answer the question about genocide of Jews, right? So they were asking if calling for the question was simple: does calling for the genocide of Jews go against the free speech maxims of the universities? And they couldn't answer, right? Iowa Hawk Blog, who's one of the best people you can ever follow, by the way, like one of the straightest down the middle Americans you're ever going to find. Absolutely not in the bag for Trump or any of these people. Really just disgusted with the brainwashing and all this stuff, and very funny, right? So he says, fun facts. A, calling for genocide against Jews, if not delivered to incite a mob to violence, is 100% constitutionally protected speech, only in the sense that it can't be punished by the government. So he puts that as A. B, you are not the government. You are a cowardly college administrator, and in no way does the First Amendment force you to accept brain dead neo Nazis in your student body. Of course, Elizabeth Warren had to answer that, and she couldn't, right? She doesn't have the mental clarity to be able to answer questions about this stuff because none of it is real. She only takes talking points. All of it is injected into her brain, and then she relays the messages, right? Maybe she generates some of them on her own. We don't know exactly what's going on, but they're not like real synthetic thoughts that come out of her goodness of her heart. She's got a lot of ulterior motives, right? We couldn't even begin to understand her incentives. We don't know what she's getting. We don't know what she was offered. What we know about Elizabeth Warren is that she stayed in the race in 2020 in the primary. For what reason? Well, a lot of people say she got a sweet deal from the Biden administration in order to strip away votes from Bernie Sanders, which allowed Biden to come up the middle, right? So if people don't see what happened here, she at one time represented the further left wing, like the Bernie wing, right? But remember, the propaganda around Bernie was too many white men, right? Bernie bros. So the bros were undercut by her sucking votes from the worst types of virtue signalers you're going to find, right? And it's true. You got to admit. I don't. Maybe some of you were Elizabeth Warren fans. Sometimes I'm in the Bruce Fenton category here, right? I thought she was a disgusting human being from the beginning, and had a pretty good idea of what was going to come from her, right? So I was never confused about who Elizabeth Warren was. But I've been sort of anti-academia for a long time, so it was very easy for me to see. But her involvement in the 2020 election, to me anyway, seemed exactly like it appeared. She stayed in the race long in order to suck votes away and destabilize Bernie, because her votes would have more naturally gone to Bernie than to Joe. So she stayed in the race to keep Bernie from gathering any power, while Joe just kept gathering the nomination votes and super delegates and whatever else it took him to get over the line. So she was complicit in Joe Biden, probably the most. She's probably the person most responsible for Joe Biden's presidency in America. I mean, I think I can defend that in a lot of ways, right? So she is literally the most responsible for the war that's going on, for all the stuff the Bidens have got us into, right? So that's her legacy, I think, right? That's what she'll be known for. So she's there. She can't answer questions about the academic stuff. She can't answer questions openly and in any way that makes any sense to anyone, right? She just keeps with the smile, right? I'm just a nice lady. How much would you like to see her drop from space? How much would you like to see in some, you know what they did too? You remember what the French did to the Nazi collaborators? Like a lot of the French women, right, made money off the soldiers stationed in town. What they did was they went around and shaved their heads and put them in the back of trucks and then drove them around town while people like spat on them and did all that kind of shit, you know? So I don't know if Elizabeth Warren gets a space drop, full space drop, but I would be into what they did in Paris, right? Little like just her face. I want to see the school marm face, right? Oh, with a shaved head or something. It would be great. It would really be great. Because she's as villainish as it gets, right? I can't think of a more evil presence in American politics. Really evil, right? You know, the Bidens, you can sort of get. They got screwed by blackmail. They got, because that's what I've been saying is the reason for Biden being the president. They don't have a lot of morality. Don't look to them for morality. But evil is another story, right? They could be evil. I don't know everything about their life, but I do see them as the most blackmailable people out there. I don't know if Senator Warren is as blackmailable. I think this is just ambition. It's not the same thing, right? The Bidens were ambitious at a different time. The VP thing, if you're scamming a little bit as a VP, well, I mean, I can forgive it, right? If Biden would have just made a couple $1 million being a scammer while VP, and then wouldn't have become president, I mean, who cares, right? Like, it's not the end of the world. A couple $1 million, he enriched himself. It's not really the same as the what does he call it? It's not exactly the same as the I'm trying to get the Alex Jones, the high-tech cashless society robot drone controlled nightmare. Right? Elizabeth Warren seems ready to sell America out for this just because she gets some advantage. That's it. She gets more Chief Spreading Bowl credit, right? More credentialism. The Bidens are just trying to survive, right? They're just trying to fight and survive. So you can kind of get it. She's not just trying to survive. No, it's not the same, right? She's trying to profit off this moment in time, which is not the same thing as what the Bidens did. So I think she's worse than the Bidens. In a lot of ways, she's worse. So the thing about the wealth destruction, the race war, Elizabeth Warren being both stories at once. Right? It's kind of perfect. It's hard to even imagine that you can put the Bitcoin story with the race story so cleanly, but Elizabeth Warren allows us to do that, right? She allows us to do that. She is both stories at once. There you go. Now, just to add, we'll talk a bit about more about the Bitcoin piece and what she said and all that. I just also want to mention the other prediction that Alex made on the show yesterday was about, and this is one we made over the summer, which is that with the killing of Joe, or what he's predicting, they will assassinate Joe Biden. The corollary to that, or the indicator that that's possible, is Hunter Biden being cut into the wind and just let go. And what we saw yesterday is Hunter is now in more legal trouble. Will Scharf breaks it down, and I'm trained as a lawyer, never practiced as a lawyer, but I can sort of understand a bit of this stuff. And it looks like he is indeed in trouble. So Will Scharf is a former federal prosecutor and someone who's followed the Hunter saga quite closely for years. And he says, these are my initial reactions. Hunter is in a lot of trouble. And if you, again, go back to Alex Jones's prediction, right? Alex predicts that a sign that the Bidens have been cut loose by the organizers of this global coup and power play have decided they can't keep running with Biden because of the methamphetamines and the trouble. So they've got to, they're turning on him and getting rid of it. And one of the ways that you can tell this is happening is because Hunter Biden is no longer being protected, which is what Alex said in the interview last night. So here's what we know, right? It was all, the sweetheart deal is over with whatever plea bargain they got done this summer. They should have taken it because now everything's gone to shit. It's all about taxes, right? It's still just the tax thing, which is also funny because the two things they get Hunter on in the end are things that most like people like myself, I don't have a problem with the Hunter's gun thing. The other thing they got him on with the guns, I think even crackheads should have guns. I don't have a problem with Hunter having a gun, right? And now they try and get him on, tax evasion. It's like, well, well, I don't know, but it looks worse or it sounds worse than because of who he is, I guess. So he's saying he's in trouble. This is real. The tax sentencing here is within years, which is a lot for a president's son, they say. So Weiss is the prosecutor, seems to be playing it straight. This prosecutor tweeting says, he says that David Weiss' appointment as special counsel could have gone in two directions. Either Weiss was going to continue the concerted effort to cover up and clean up Hunter's long history of criminal activity, or he's going to go rogue and hammer Hunter with the full force of the law. He assumed cover up, but based on the indictment and previous firearms indictment, I can't find fault with his actions so far. He is appropriately and vigorously prosecuting tax and gun crimes that we already knew about, right? Yeah, it's true. It is easy. Yeah, it is easy, tell me. But the important thing here that this guy recognizes is that there's more egg on the media's face here, right? So this goes into our theme of this InfoWars thing and how important war for information and news really is. And now, we're talking about a changing system, which we're going to get into in a second, but it's one of the reasons why Bitcoiners have such a strategic advantage in this war over information. We don't consume information that comes from fiat propagators, fiat nodes, and anyone else who would try and put you into the hallucinatory system, right? So we have a kind of inoculation or vaccination that comes from our work together being a P2P information model, not a centralized third party information model. It's a big deal. So this Hunter Biden thing does again embarrass the effectiveness of the news because of the amount of conservative lying, right? So here's what it writes: the mainstream media was an active participant in Joe Biden's lies in 2020. The media actively ran cover burying Hunter Biden stories, showing a startling lack of interest in the Biden family's web of foreign business interests, and insisting that there was nothing to see. A blackout in reporting about Hunter's now validated laptop was the pinnacle of all of his efforts, of the all hands on deck effort. So, um, what I think we saw there, and what we might find out, right? This is my prediction, and this comes from Mike Benz, that Hunter is an actual CIA asset, right? So it's not just going to be that he's corrupted, right? That's not just going to be what the story is. It's that he's corrupted, and we're going to understand more of the incentives, and they were for not the things Americans would be okay with, right? So, um, so if you take those stories and you take uh, the uh, the race war thing, right, and add them together, um, we come back to um, the vaccine stuff for a second, and I'll show you what I mean. Um, because so think of the race war, right? Think of information sources. Think of the wealth generation being destroyed, and then you have Vivek. Vivek. So Vivek. Now remember, he made a bunch of predictions that sound a lot like Alex Jones's, and he was criticized in the media after his interview for sounding like Alex Jones. They literally said full Alex Jones, right? So now it turns out that the debate 2 nights ago has a missing piece of content. Did you hear about this? Did anyone hear about this? So for about 5 minutes, the camera went dark and they moved to commercial, and no one heard what Vivek said. And the question was about pharma funding and the news, right? What people have been saying for a long time. Basically, you can't trust the mainstream news because they're fully funded and all of their advertising comes from pharma. It's what what they said was the reason why Tucker Carlson got fired, right? We talked about that this week, I think Monday or Tuesday. The real reason why Tucker was let go, basically the advertisers had enough of his attitude and not playing ball and criticizing them. So Megyn Kelly asked Vivek about this stuff, and he said, well, I love Ronald Reagan, as many people do, but Ronald Reagan made a huge mistake. And the huge mistake Ronald Reagan made, which is something that RFK taught us all about, right? I didn't know anything about this until RFK started on Joe Rogan and started talking about the history of the pharma business model for vaccines. And it's the lack of culpability and the lack of ability to sue them, which creates this incentive model where it's cheaper to get a vaccine to market than it is any other medicine because you don't have to go through the same testing. And you're also protected from bad drugs. So it's not only better from a commercial distribution point of view, it's better from the long tail of risk management and potential litigation because it's exempted, right? So Vivek, in this missing piece, someone found it and published it. Adam Townsend published it, a few other people. Adam Townsend saying here, Vivek, I found the missing minutes. And so Vivek in this says, look, as much as I love Ronald Reagan, I'm going to go back on what he did here. This was a huge mistake, and we're going to do this right away. We're going to take away their legal immunity and their immunity from paying damages if they make a bad drug. And so that is coincidentally missing from from that whole thing, right? So um, um, go back to what they said about uh, the academia falling, and our inability to even trust anyone in this sort of information war, right? And information coming out of these third parties just being so garbage. Here's what. So, if you ever guys have heard of Rome research, all right. So, Rome research was a thing I started to use during COVID at the very beginning. It's kind of like a notes. I take a lot of notes. It's kind of like notation software that can let you make connections where you wouldn't have. It's a pretty interesting. I've stopped using it. I used it for like a year, and I used it for all kinds of stuff. I thought it was pretty interesting. Like I said, I've stopped using it, but I could still see why someone would want to use this. This was a big Balaji Srinivasan tool. A lot of people started using it a couple years ago. I was one of them. It was like kind of a Silicon Valley thing. It was very big over there in Silicon Valley. So the creator of it is a guy named Connor White Sullivan, and he wrote the following, right? And he starts with the meme about doing your own research. What have I been saying for a long time? Doing your own research is a bad look. Like, I don't want to do my own vaccine research. I don't want to do my own health research. I don't want to do any of that stuff, right? But what choice do we have? We can't trust any of the services. We can't trust any of the information sources. So what other choice do you have? Right? You end up looking like a complete idiot, but you have no choice. You have to do your own research. I don't want to. I'm not good enough at it. I don't know what any of this stuff is, right? I don't know how to tell my risks about mRNA platforms. What the fuck is that, right? I have no idea. And I'm not lacking in IQ and education to understand this stuff. It's just hard, right? Only super specialized people. And I want to live in a world with specialized people. I don't want to live in a world where everyone's a low IQ, carrier of buckets of water. It's not going to get us anywhere, right? That's not the world we want to live in. That's not a world for Bitcoiners either, right? Now, I don't want to be in the techno nightmare drone thing that Alex Jones said either, but obviously there's a middle ground somewhere, right? So here's what the Rome research guy said, and this is a normie, high IQ person struggling with what's going on in the world today, and I'll read what he says. Right, someone who hasn't actually bit into Bitcoin yet. This is one of the smartest people you're going to find in Silicon Valley, and this is what he says. Right, so he's talking about the meme of doing your own research, and he goes, and it represents the epistemic reformation we're in the midst of right now. Many still make the move of trusting the Pope of Science, aka Harvard, Yale, New York Times, NGO consensus of experts. They go to bed, ignore the decentralized, just show me the data analysis of autists who want to look for themselves, and end up seeing painful reality of how incentives have eaten away at these institutions and unmoored them from reality bit by bit, generation by generation. A lot of you here, in fact, are smarter and more reality based than the experts that won their position by going along to get along. It isn't that hard to find something the world's top doctors and scientists miss when their funding or tenure depends on them not seeing it. But it isn't rational or for a median person to trust you, and they reject your contrarian claims because to follow every argument and check each step of your reasoning for themselves would be a DDoS on their attention, which is exactly it. Like, we just don't have the ability or time to do this stuff, right? Or skills or expertise or any of it. 30 years was blood. The 30 years war was bloody. This reformation, especially in hot flashes like during COVID, has been and will be brutal too. So he's giving a historical context about what's going on. He's saying the 30 years war is equivalent to what we're going through here. It won't be rational for mainstream to reallocate authority to uncredentialized amateurs, right? So remember, it won't be rational for mainstream to reallocate authority to uncredentialed amateurs, no matter how much more correct they are, until there is a very legible and scalable way to delegate trust, so that not everyone has to fact check everything the independent shadow academy, the visible college, the commons, the bazaar puts forward against the cathedral of expert consensus that is so often state-sponsored scientism. So what's he basically saying here is that we need better performance. We need better humans. We have to come up with a legible and scalable way to delegate trust. Well, no, that's not the way it's going to go at all. The way it's going to go, the way I can tell it's going to go, is that by having clear incentives, by changing the actual nature of the money so that people like Elizabeth Warren can't straight up lie and hide their ambitions, because you can actually follow the money. right? And again, the incentive system that Bitcoin creates fixes science, not because science itself is broken. It just incentivizes the humans in a way that is more aligned together. It doesn't fix their brain. It doesn't fix the way they would approach a problem. It doesn't fix the scientific method or anything like that. It doesn't fix their skill level, doesn't fix their talent level, none of those things. But it's what he said originally. It's that the incentives eating away institutions and unmoored them from reality bit by bit, generation by generation. Well, that's the fake money. It's clearly the fake money because the fake money has to be propagated with the lies. So if you make money a lie and you need lies to propagate it, well, what do you think you're going to get? You're going to get lies about medicine. You're going to get lies about food. You're going to get lies about government. You're going to get hallucinations about all of these things because if you can't hallucinate the thing you're selling, then you're not selling it anymore, right? You're just selling something that doesn't exist and people can see it. So they've got to hallucinate it. They've got to hallucinate that the president of the United States is the leader of the free world and that our science is the best and that our peacekeepers are so great. Right? So none of it's true. None of it's true. And um, here's the good news, right? Here's the absolute good news. When you think about what Jamie Dimon said and what Elizabeth Warren said, that they want to kill, Bitcoin. Here's what Barron's wrote as a headline: Jamie Dimon wants to kill off Bitcoin. Buffett hates it. Why it's invincible, right? So here they go in to say why it's invincible. It's a game of opinions, right? Warren Buffett is another and has been sharing his view, and he's very much a hater, but in a strange sort of way, Bitcoin has proved to be a classic Buffett value investing play. Investors are buying the digital asset and holding on to it, one of his trading principles, and it's climbed 160% this year. Buffett won't go anywhere near it because it doesn't have any intrinsic value, but millions of investors around the world do see value, or at least they've assigned value and are piling in. It's not everyone's cup of tea. But it's not going to be killed off, obviously, right? So all of this to say that what I write in my book, The Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management, about the root key access that fiat has to people's subconscious is actually where these things are programmed. It's actually where the limits of our trust-based system have failed to scale, right? That's what stopped it. But we can scale a trust-based system if we have the right incentives. And obviously, Bitcoin provides the right incentives for people to just be open about money flowing. It's that simple. If you can follow the money, you're going to understand people's motivations. You're going to understand what they wanted, why they did it. It's not mind reading. You're going to understand what the goals were if you can put money there. So, the formula that we all have, that is obvious to us, that is coming right now, that all of this thing, all the stuff Alex Jones predicted, right? He predicted that and isn't it funny that DEI, which is the race-based software that's being programmed into the NPCs, right? The DEI, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Isn't it funny that it actually spells die? Diversity, inclusion, and equity spells die. So die, which is what he's saying. There's going to be a race-based war in his predictions that will limit the population of the world to 500 million. He believes that 90% of the world's about to die. Diversity, inclusion, and equity. So we have this decision, right? And the mind virus is real, right? Gad Saad writing that even the medical system in Canada, right? Now, I tell all the low IQ people to go access Canadian healthcare. It's the best. It's the best. If you're Greta, go get some Canadian healthcare. You're going to feel way better. But here's what Gad Saad is saying is happening in Canada. This is the Canadian medicine, blah, 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 right? A new model of CanMed would seek to center values such as anti-oppression, anti-racism, and social justice rather than medical expertise. This is their actual statement. It would prioritize bi-directional relationships with patients, providers, communities, the land, the health system, and society at large, rather than the individual physician as a gatekeeper of professionalized knowledge. With this new model, we can reflect a stance of humility over hubris, you colonizer. and demonstrate how we as physicians must be constantly seeking to learn, explore, critically reflect, and grow. So it's all about the physician's growth. It's perfect. It's perfect. Thank you, physicians. Do it. Um, so you've got these folks, right? And this is Balaji saying that it's either meritocracy, a Bitcoin system, or it's die. It's die. So here's the good news, guys. We got the Balajis of the world on an intercept course with the Alex Joneses of the world. And here's our coalition, right? It's Alex Jones, it's Balaji, it's the plebs, it's the independent journalists. And I don't think Elizabeth Warren and the Bidens and fucking all these losers are ever going to be able to compete with us. 2024 is going to be the year we stop these stupid losers. Losers. How can we lose to people? If we lose to Elizabeth Warren and what are the other mentally impaired people we're up against? You know, I don't know, Janet Yellen. If we lose to these stupid losers, we deserve what we have, okay, guys? But we're not going to lose. It's going to be great. 2024 is going to be the best year. Oh, and by the way, this is another thing. You get Tucker Carlson, right, the other day, talking about the pyramids and all that stuff. So here's what's really fun about the Alex Jones stuff, right? I mean, this is hilarious. Remember what I've said a few times here. In 2021, at the biggest Bitcoin show energy-wise there ever was, right? We were the first event in the world coming out of COVID. I made a prediction early that we would be the first event in the world coming out of COVID to meet. And the reason I said that is because COVID destabilized Bitcoiners the least. We had the least amount of adjustment of our worldview to make, right? We predicted. So you can see this right now. You got Tracy Alloway or whatever from the Joe Weisenthal Odd Lots podcast talking about the reverse repo, right? Reverse repo, people are talking about reverse repo now. She's saying, oh, reverse repos gonna blow up soon, right? Well, I remember Joe Weisenthal laughing at us in 2019 about reverse repo. And because we were saying as Bitcoiners, this is money printing. The bank system is insolvent. They're going to have to print like crazy to keep this thing on life support. You got to reverse repo. Think of reverse repo, the money, the interest rate that the central bank pays the banks to park their cash or their T-bills with the Federal Reserve. Think of that as a defibrillator. Think of that as just like keeping a zombie alive because they have to put money to it. So they just swap the same amount of money, right? It's $100 of a bond, $100 of cash, and they just swap it. But then the central bank in a reverse repo pays the banks to do that, the overnight rate. So at the time, it was only in the billions being lent overnight. So the interest was, whatever, overnight lending, 3% of 20 billion divided by 365 because it's one day. The interest rates per year, it's one day. So it's just millions of dollars. But that thing grew to trillions being swapped overnight. So the interest was being paid on trillions overnight just to keep the banks afloat, right? So when I say we had the least amount of adjustment, in 2019, Bitcoiners were saying there's going to be a massive printing event in 2020. I said that publicly on television. I said it to Andrew Ross Sorkin and all these fucking people, right? Oh, it's technical. They said to me, it's technical. So I made the bet that Bitcoiners would be the first people in the world to meet after COVID because we were the least saturated in buying the bullshit. We were the most prescient and see it coming. I can remember, speaking of Balaji was on the board of CoinDesk's editorial to write our event, to create our events. And he was telling us in December, there ain't no event. You're not going to be meeting in public in New York. And I didn't believe him. I said, I don't know, Balaji. I mean, come on, like a little cold from China, right? I'm not worried about it. In the end, I didn't understand the forces at play and all that, but it still wasn't that confusing when it actually happened. You were able to understand and explain to yourself and to others what was going on. So by the time 2021 came around, I knew that Bitcoiners would not be afraid to meet publicly, that we could commercially and viably do an event and gather all these people. And indeed, we were right. So when we made that prediction and we all gathered the way we did in 2021, we had a sense of where things were headed. And at that event, because things were going so well, I was obsessed with one subject in 2021 at the event. Anyone who I spoke to, spoke to Dergigi, I spoke to all kinds of people about it. It was Atlantis. I was obsessed. I still am, but at the time, it was even more just, it was all that was on my mind. The reshot structure, ancient civilizations. I've been interested in this stuff for a while, right? This had been a thing I'd been interested in for a while. Can you believe now that they're actually doing a Bitcoin Atlantis show in Madeira, and Dergigi and a few others are involved? They didn't even know what I was talking about in 2021. So now the world's catching up. We're going to have a Bitcoin Atlantis show in a Bitcoin island of Madeira. Things are moving, right? But here's the thing. Tucker Carlson has been talking about this history. If you think the news is fake, he's now on that plan, right? That that history is even faker than the news, not even close. And I think in 2024, that's going to be one of the more amazing things we learn about just how fake our history really is. And I think it's going to be one of the most revolutionary things. And it's going to be one of the things that helps Bitcoin the most, because we're going to find out the true history of money, the true history of money. And it's a lot different than we think. And I think we're going to find out that it goes back way further than it did. And the fake news goes back way further than it did. And this is going to be the best. It's going to be the best time ever. So 2024, I'm not kidding, is going to be the most fun Bitcoiners have ever had. And we're going to win. It's going to be the great year that we were waiting for, and we're going to end World War III. And my prediction remains, when they try, just think of what that Rome research guy wrote, right? The incentives and how it broke all of our systems. Now he's saying we got to be better humans and get a better system and all that. I don't think that's going to happen, right? I mean, we're going to be cognitively repaired from all the brain damage that we've suffered from brainwashing and psyops. So that's going to help. So we are going to perform better. But it's the incentives. It's exactly what he says. It's the incentives, right? So Alex Jones still has the Bitcoin blind spot. We love him anyway, obviously. He's invited to Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, obviously. I think you're going to see that in 2024, our ability to win this war is going to become clear, and our ability to change the system around the world for these incentives to fix healthcare, food, and they spoke all about it in the show last night. It was everything that Bitcoiners have been talking about, everything Bitcoiners have been telling you about. Bitcoiners have been talking about P2P systems and food and information. And these are the things that are going to help us build a much better world. So we're winning, guys. We're going to win. We're going to win. Being confused is just too lazy to find out the truth. You get what you deserve. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've also got to, people get what we deserve, for sure. Like I said, though, I think we do have a big job. I used to think before COVID, that's what changed for me. I thought we could save everybody. I don't believe that anymore. I used to, but I've given up on that idea, I think. I hope so, but I think there will be people who choose to believe Elizabeth Warren, even when she's being dropped from space and her head is shaved. There you go. All right, team. Did I miss anything? Was there any other fun news? Dropped from space would be nice. Yeah. Bitcoin or bug sandwiches. Yeah, we don't want the bug sandwiches. Exercises. That's racist. So racist. All right, team. That's all I got for today. Have a great day. I shall see you all tomorrow.